As above, so below.
Hey, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, sometimes known as Bernard Beitman, MD. I study coincidences. I got a book back there. Please also subscribe and like and send me some messages because that really helps train the algorithm to get more people to pay attention to synchronicity. So appreciate your doing that and thinking about this. Today, we're going to enter into a new realm. This is a book called The Coincidence Makers. And some of you may have this idea that some people are sometimes making up stuff and doing stuff like, what if the drink you just spilled, the train you just missed, or the lottery ticket you just found was not a random occurrence? What if it's all part of a larger plan? What if there's no such thing as a chance encounter? What if there are people we don't know determining our destiny? Well, there's some ideas that maybe there is an Earth Coincidence Control Office where there are agents who are helping create the coincidences of our lives. Right now, it's a kind of fantasy, but fantasies sometimes end up having something to do with reality. So in this book, enter the coincidence makers. And we'll talk about a guy named Guy as a place to start. But before we introduce you to Guy, I'm going to introduce you to my alter ego. Yes, I am indeed Dr. Coincidence. I am Dr. Coincidence, and I take many different forms. And then this one, I've got my blue hat, my sunglasses, and a lot of images hanging around. And there are other versions of this. And sometimes I'm a guy who helps coincidences happen. I'm kind of like spreading the fairy dust of coincidence. And here we'll talk about maybe a more detailed way that people make coincidences happen. A beginning part of this book, The Coincidence Makers. And as I mentioned, the key character at the beginning is a guy named Guy. His body tilted back a bit from the table. He was in a coffee shop, leaning in a position that was supposed to suggest a calmness, supposed to be calm, engendered by years of self-discipline. With a small coffee cup gently cradled between his fingers, like a precious seashell. From the corner of his eye, he followed the progress of the second hand on the large clock hanging above the cash register. As always, in the final moments before an implementation, at the final moments before an implementation, he felt the same frustrating awareness of his breathing and his heartbeat, which occasionally drowned out the tick-tock of the seconds. The cafe was half filled. There were several people in the cafe, but we're going to focus on a couple of them. A bit toward the back, in the corner, was a student, busy erasing the face of a lover from his heart. A table full of papers covered in dense handwriting. He gazed at a large mug of hot chocolate immersed in a daydream disguised as academic concentration. Guy knew his name, medical history, emotional history, musings, dreams, small fears. Guy knew everything filed away about this student. Everything he needed to know in order to guess the possibilities, to try to arrange them in accordance with the complex statistics of cause and effect. Finally, two waitresses, each with tired eyes, who were somehow still smiling and standing, conducted a quiet, intense conversation by the closed door near the kitchen. Rather, one of them spoke occasionally, and the other one pretended like she was listening. Well, he put down the coffee cup and counted the seconds. It's all very timed. It was 17 minutes before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, according to the clock above the cash register. Guy always loved the warm sensation, which nearly permeated to his bones during the minute preceding the execution of the mission. It was the sensation that came from knowing he was about to reach out a finger and nudge the planet or the heavens. The knowledge that he would be diverting things from their regular and familiar path, things that until a second ago were moving in a completely different direction. He was like a man painting great and complex landscapes, but without a brush and paint, simply with the precise, gentle turn of a kaleidoscope. Billions of such moments happened every day, corresponding with each other, offsetting each other, and swinging each other in tragic comic dances of possible futures. None of the protagonists were aware of these moments and these movements. And he, in one simple decision, saw that change was about to happen and then executed elegantly, quietly, secretly. Even if Guy were exposed, no one would believe what stood behind it all, and still he always trembled a bit beforehand. Guy inhaled deeply, and everything started to happen. The student shook his head. Guy exhaled. Exactly on time, a short and irritable summons tore the two waitresses from each other, sending one of them into the kitchen. Guy placed a few dollars on the table. The student began to collect his papers, still slow, still pensive. The second hand reached the halfway mark. Guy put down his cup, still half full, exactly 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the table, and he put it on top of the money. The cup, 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the table with the money underneath. When the hand on the clock reached 42, he stood and waved to the waitress who remained outside the kitchen in a motion that communicated both thank you and goodbye. Goodbye and thank you. She waved to him and started to move toward the table. As the second hand passed the 3/4 mark, Guy walked toward the sun-drenched street and disappeared from the view of the cafe. 3, 2, 1. The cute student, as the waitress was noticing, was also preparing to leave. It was Julie's table, that is the other person, but Shirley would apparently have to take care of it. Now that her co-worker, Julie, was in the kitchen, it was up to Shirley. Not that she minded, she liked students. She liked cute young men. A cute student was a winning combination. Then she shook her head. No, stop those thoughts immediately. Enough of that. Charming guys and every other adjective you feel obliged to toss around. None of that. None of that. I'm on a break, Shirley said. I've had enough. Then the other young man, that's Guy, the one with the melancholy eyes, waved to her as he began to leave. She knew him if she could know any one man from his weekly silent visits. She approached his table and made a point of not looking at the student. After all, he was only a human being, and an entire year had passed. Clearly, she felt the need for some type of human warmth, but it was not the time for her. She'd had enough. She'd had enough. She wasn't going to try with men anymore. She reached out her hand, a bit lost in her thoughts. She heard a soft noise behind her and turned her head. It was the girl with the earphones humming to herself. Even before turning her head back, Shirley realized she had made a mistake. Her brain now perceived the events as they transpired, predicting them, timing them with the precision of an atomic clock. Now her hand was moving the cup a bit instead of grabbing it. Now the cup, which for some reason was placed so close to the edge, was losing its balance. Now she was reaching her other hand, trying to catch the falling cup, and she was falling, and the cup shattered on the floor, and she cried out a sharp, frustrated cry. Now here was the student, that is a young man who wasn't interesting at all, lifting his head toward the cry, moving his hand in the wrong direction, and inadvertently spilling the hot chocolate on his paper. And now Bruno, her boss, came from the kitchen. This was the third time she'd made a mistake like this. She was fired. As the story continues, various other things are programmed by Guy to happen. For the student who had spilled the hot chocolate on his papers and was upset by that. And for Shirley, the waitress, on her way home, Guy had made it possible for the student to give Shirley a ride home. So the student gave her a ride home, and just to make sure things were going to work out, Guy called Shirley's phone and acted as if he was calling someone else. He was really calling Shirley. And she was frustrated with him asking for Doris. Guy was asking for Doris. And Shirley dropped the phone on the floor of the car instead of putting it back in her purse, while the student had been trying to get her to go to the beach with him. But Shirley had refused, got out, and went home. And then realized she didn't have her phone. And the student answered the phone that was on the floor and went back to give it to her. And Shirley ended up accepting his invitation to have a beer and some snacks at the beach. And so a relationship between two strangers began with a series of coincidences. Now, isn't this maybe a little like it happens? Maybe we sometimes think there's someone behind the coincidences that brought two people together. I mean, I attribute two of my key ones to a father being involved and somehow making it happen. And one of the people that I got connected to, I thought in this way, agreed that that probably is how it happened. But are there other ways of thinking about this? Is there an Earth coincidence control office? Are there people here arranging things in ways that we don't know? Are they secret agents operating behind the scenes, not just on small things, but as the book goes on with larger things? So with that, I interest you in the possibility of Earth Coincidence Control Office, and that there may be other ways of thinking about how coincidences happen. And this book by Yoav Blum is where I've been reading from. And I thank Yoav Blum, who is a computer programmer and still says he's trying to figure out what he's going to do when he grows up, has written a book that is stimulating for us to think another way about how coincidences happen. So I bid you adieu and say goodbye as Dr. Coincidence says goodbye to you. Thank you for being with me today, and please think about buying this book and liking our channel, and I'd love to hear your comments about this book.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.